When America thinks about the history of Russia, our thoughts usually go straight to the Cold War. There is a whole nother side to Russia that we don't always see. Russia's contribution to culture. From Russia we get the art of ballet, the taste of caviar, and of course, vodka. We also don't get to see the strength of their women. In 1796, Catherine the Great took power in a bloodless coup and stayed in power for over 30 years. Under Catherine, Russia had an era of enlightenment. Because of the American and Russian competitiveness, the Russian educational system often compares and contrasts with our own educational system in terms of educational and scientific developments. From this competitiveness, we see the success of the Sputnik in 1957. One of education's most top priorities in Russia was to transform the backward agricultural economy into a more modern and technological one. There was an emphasis on shaping its students into be perfect students and perfect citizens. In the 1920s, the collective group learning and social labor projects were tried out. In the 1930s, Joseph Stalin took power and he redesigned the educational system to include academic subjects and that instruction should be delivered in an orderly, systematic, dialectical logic. Stalin decided that the USSR needed trained scientists, engineers, and technicians. School curriculum was then emphasized mathematics and physical sciences, like chemistry and physics. The curriculum of history, social studies, arts, and literature reflected Stalin's official ideology. There are two forms of education. As in photo 1, there is polytechnic education. This form of education is an emphasis on Marx's concept of developing socially useful technical labor. He predicted workers would enjoy value that their labor had created. As in the second photo, there is aesthetic education, which under Stalin was created as an artistic outlook. Artists and writers were under tight party control with little freedom of expression. These arts were used as important forms of formal and informal education. Unlike in America, where our artists have freedom of speech and freedom of expression. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev became CP General Secretary and brought about change in education and educational policy. He urged that schools should become places of social, political, and economic innovation, and not to be conformist as they used to be. Some educators urged that basic internal school reform should take place before larger socioeconomic change. Gorbachev knew that reform depended on revitalizing curriculum and instruction. He advocated for change in educational research and in textbook preparation and publication. Teachers were told to be more flexible in their methods and to use discussion rather than memorized recitations as teaching methods. Teachers were encouraged to deviate from the textbook and to rely on initiative and creativity to create their own teaching strategies. Gorbachev's attempts at reform had effects that he had not anticipated. States of the USSR were starting to fight for their independence. December 22, 1991, the USSR was replaced by the confederation called the Commonwealth of Independent States. December 25, 1991, Gorbachev resigned as president. He was credited with contributing to the end of the Cold War. In order to enact reforms, financial ability is required. This can be difficult for some countries because it is dependent on taxes and other resources. During the USSR, educational systems were funded by the local districts and central government. They paid half of the school's operating expenses. Under the RF, it was difficult to get funding through taxes, so they needed to find new ways of raising financing for education. One such way was that due to companies becoming privatized, corporations would be taxed for income taxes, and this would be used for the needed assistance for education. Under the Soviet, preschool was given a lot of attention because it was believed that instilling ideological formation is best to begin as early as possible. The early childhood programs provided a nurturing environment for children while parents worked. For women to be able to be part of the workforce, the Soviet government expanded early childhood and kindergarten education. The future of early childhood education in the RF and other now free states depend on available resources. Priorities shifted to general primary and secondary education. In 1992, the Law on Education was established. It created the structure and organization of school systems. Primary and secondary schools were combined, and the law permitted for differentiation of types of schools. The school system consisted of obligatory basic education and higher education. Primary and secondary schools includes 11 years of study. Primary school education was for ages 6 to 10, and senior school was for ages 10 to 15. Russia has one of the best mass education systems in the world, producing a literary rate of 98%. In order to attend higher education, one must remain in secondary education to complete 2 more years from ages 15 to 17. Primary grades curriculum includes mathematics and computing, language, arts, music, physical education, labor training, and local cultural studies. Grades 4 to 8 offer more advanced mathematics, Russian language, literature, and cultural studies. Physical sciences like physics, astronomy, chemistry, natural science, biology, geography, history, social studies, foreign language, art and music, physical education, labor training, and electives. Grades 9 to 11 include more advanced mathematics, continuation of physical science, continuation of natural science study, especially biology, fundamentals of market economy, history, world culture, social studies, and continuation of native language and Russian language studies. Foreign language, technical drawing, physical education, labor training, and electives are included as well. The mathematics subjects are highly valued due to its relationship with the sciences and technology. It is rigorously taught at all grade levels. Language is also very important. Language, such as reading, writing, composition, and literature, are key foundation skills for success in learning. Instruction of language takes up a lot of time in primary and secondary schooling. At 15 years old, children may choose to enter a vocational school or a non-university institute. These typically offer programs of academic subjects and a program of training into technical field until students are 17 or 18. The Russian school year is comprised of 4 terms with vacations in between. 1 week in November, 2 weeks in January, 1 week in March, and nearly 3 months in the summer. School is held from September 1st until the final week of May, with exams in June. In South Florida, we also have 4 terms that begin in August and end at the beginning of June. A school day runs approximately from 8 a.m. and finishes at around 1 or 2. School days are 5 days a week, with some schools requiring extra study on Saturdays. In South Florida middle schoolers, we have school from 9:45 until around 4 o'clock. This too is 5 days a week. A typical class lasts 40 to 45 minutes with a 5 to 15-minute break in between. In primary school, students have 4 classes a day. This increases to 5 or 6 classes a day in secondary school and 6 or 7 at a senior high school. In American primary school, students have 6 one-hour classes with a 5-minute break to walk between classes. A normal class consists of 20 to 30 students. In primary school, pupils have 1 teacher for all subjects taught. American students have about 25 students with a different teacher for each subject. Teacher training in Russia began at the end of the 18th century and has been transformed many times. Some issues related to teacher education has arisen. The implementation of training programs for future teachers is one such issue, and the lack of independent assessment of the quality of training. These problems prompted the government to start a reform of teacher education in 2014. Entering the teaching profession can be done through a number of different ways. The main route is vocational training institutions that are funded by local governments. There are also higher educational institutions that are not government funded, and educational institutions of continuing professional development and professional retaining. The types of educational institutions correlate with the grade levels. Courses offered are child development, educational psychology, children's literature, and methods of teaching. Clinical and teaching practices are also emphasized. The content of all teacher educational programs are based on the federal state educational standards. I hope you enjoyed this program on the educational standards in Russia, and have a great day.